everyone, my name is Fritsch and I'm a rising senior at John Carroll. I've been on 2 immersions. I went to El Salvador on the US-Mexico border and then returned to the border as a student coordinator. Both of these trips were incredibly life-changing for me. I knew nothing about immigration or even social justice in general before I went on an immersion, and I had no idea what to expect. I was terrified. When I first went to the border, I was often moved to tears when facing the pain that migrants have to endure. When I looked at the crosses that cover the Mexican side of the border wall, honoring those who have died trying to migrate. When I looked up at the wall and imagined the thousands of people that are desperate and brave enough to attempt to enter our country, even when met with harsh racism and dangerous stereotypes. When I first entered a migrant shelter and encountered people that were tired, hungry, sick, and frustrated. Some were bitter towards the Americans that had treated them so poorly and chose to deport them. But many people were desperate for us to know that they were not the horrible people that the media and our elected officials often make them out to be. When I returned to the border, I was once again extremely emotional when facing so many injustices. I watched migrants face judges while held in chains like animals. I visited Border Patrol facilities and stood next to a detention center that held 100 migrants in conditions that I don't like to imagine, and listened as officers tried to justify and make light of the way that they treat immigrants. I learned about the way that the current administration is making it nearly impossible to legally immigrate or seek asylum in this country through new immigration policies. But most importantly, during my last trip to the border, I spent hours talking to migrants, serving them meals, playing with their children, and listening to their stories. One word you cannot avoid when you go to the border is humanize. It is essential when talking about immigration to remember that it is a humanitarian issue. Each person you talk to has a unique story filled with its own heartbreaks and tragedies. I listened as mothers told me that gangs were after their children, as I held those same children in my arms and they laid their head on my shoulder. I listened as a 6-year-old boy told me about his uncle who was killed and his little brother who was shot by a gang member. That same little boy played with me, laid in my arms, and gave me a kiss on the cheek when he had to leave me. A 3-year-old girl told me about her parents and then asked me if mine were still alive, as if death was a normal topic of conversation for her. I cannot imagine what these innocent children experience on a daily basis, but I know that the people we encounter at the border are some of the most loving, determined, selfless, kind, and brave people I've ever met in my life. Their courage and hope are inspiring, and it breaks my heart that many of their journeys will end in disappointment, detainment, or deportation because of U.S. policies. The US-Mexico border trip is not what I would call a feel-good immersion. People don't always come home with a profound sense of hope. Many people return from this trip feeling sad, or disheartened, or frustrated, or paralyzed. I know that that's how I felt. I felt such a profound sense of guilt and uselessness. I did not know why I had so much privilege while other people don't, and I felt like there was nothing that I could do to help. But with everything going on in the world right now, I've realized that I was wrong. Immersions are not a way for you to have a life-changing experience and then forget all about it. They are also not for you to come home and tell everyone about your trip and then stop there. That won't fulfill you. The immersion program calls us to be allies and advocates for justice, to walk with others in their fight for change. We have a duty to use our privilege in tangible ways. And this is something I think that I have failed to do many times. As I reflect on both of my immersion trips, I realize that I need to challenge myself to continue to be informed on not only immigration issues, but about other social justice issues as well. I need to remain attentive to what policies are being enacted that are contrary to human rights. And I need to use my voice to work towards social justice in this country by signing petitions, contacting elected officials, attending protests, and learning to be an anti-racist individual, an anti-injustice individual, an anti-dehumanization individual. I'm forever grateful to the immersion program for teaching me how to strive to live out a faith that does justice, to try and stand in the margins until those margins disappear, and to always try to humanize those who are being demonized. Thank you for listening, and I hope I see you soon.